Hi, everyone, and welcome to the August APMA PodMed student webinar, How to Excel in Your First 2 Years of Podiatric Medical School. My name is Abhinav Flava, and I'm currently a fourth-year podiatric student at the California School of Podiatric Medicine. I also serve as the APMSA student liaison to the APMA Board of Trustees. APMA is excited to offer this webinar as students are preparing for a new school year, whatever that may look like. We want to chat this evening about preparing for success in the upcoming year with the help of tips and resources from our student panel. We will feature a lot of Q&A during this webinar, and attendees are able to ask questions, throughout the broadcast by submitting their questions through the question box at the bottom of the GoToWebinar toolbar. Joining me today, we have third-year students Jonathan Garcia, Tamana Haq, and Shalvi Prasad from the California School of Podiatric Medicine at Samuel Merritt University. Welcome, everyone. APMA Career Development Manager Tiffany Kildale will be helping moderate the questions for the group this afternoon, so I will now turn it over to her.
Thank you, Abhinav, and thanks everyone for joining us. And an even bigger thank you to our fantastic student panel. I'm so excited to have you guys on with us. I feel like we've been talking forever now, so I'm just really excited that we can finally make this webinar happen. So to all of you that are listening in, just a quick reminder, you guys can submit your questions through the question box in your GoToWebinar toolbar. So with that being said, I am going to disappear so that you guys see our panel and not me. And we are going to start with our first question. I'm going to open this up to the full group here. You all are in your third year of podiatric medical school. So looking back, what is one thing you all would have done differently? And Shalvi, I'll let you start this one.
Oh man, okay, that's a loaded question. So I think it would just be to be open to change. I think when I first came in, I was trying to keep whatever I had from undergrad, and keep with that style. And I think very quickly you realize that you need to change that. So yeah, I think just realizing that earlier, and then taking advantage of all the resources that are out there. So there's a ton of things out there, and take advantage of it.
I imagine that's probably even more important on a year like this one, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
How about you, Tamana? What do you think?
I would say, to add to what Shelby said, I would say that we all we're so excited to get into med school and we're ready to get started, but we don't really realize where we are till we take our first test, then we get our score, and then we start working on how to study and things like that. My recommendation would be, that's something I would change, is that before even taking your first test, go find a tutor, go talk to your professors, just see where you are in your understanding. That will really help you get an upper hand when you first take your test. And then from there, you realize where you are, and then you can move on and change your study schedule or change your study method or whatever you want to do. But I feel like that's something I would definitely change, is just starting early with all the resources that are available.
And we will dive even more into those resources a little later on. Jonathan, when you and I were emailing about this webinar, this is one of the questions that you proposed and you wanted to start with. So what do you say? What would you, looking back, what would you have done differently?
I think in the beginning, I would have spent more time relaxing before school started, honestly. I think a lot of times you get this anxiety that you should start studying now, and that people are telling you, oh, you should start really looking at this material and reviewing stuff and everything. And I think you get caught up in all of that I guess scariness or questioning of what's going to happen or what's going to come soon. So I think really just relax, take your time off, do nothing, and watch all the Netflix you can, go on all the fun trips you can and everything, and get all of your partying out with your friends and everything, because it's you just hit the ground running from day one. And I know studying for boards, I didn't do anything. I literally had to have my Netflix account password changed so that I wouldn't know it. So yeah, I think my thing is I would have a lot more fun before.
So you all have so much going on. You're all super busy. I know everybody sort of joined this call this evening and was like, oh my gosh, it's been a crazy day and here's why. What are some tips? How do you all stay organized? Shelby, you want to start us with this one?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough. So at our school, we have small clinic groups. And one of the people in the group, she sets up this Google Calendar. And I've kind of adopted this from her and just kind of made my own. But Google Calendar has been a lifesaver and my best friend in like all of this. Because very quickly you realize that it's hard to remember everything that you have to do in all of the different webinars or club meetings or extracurricular things that you're doing. So having a Google Calendar to kind of organize when you're going to be in class, when you're going to be in lab, when those meetings are, those little things that you volunteer for, or if you're tutoring, like just adding it to the calendar so you're aware of where your time is going and if you have time for a new thing that's coming up. So yeah, I mean, I think Google Calendar would be the biggest thing. And it helps you kind of see when tests are, so you can schedule fun things around that. Because you do want to make time to have fun. You don't want to just only be doing school, because you'll go crazy. Or at least I would go crazy.
I completely understand that. I don't think you're alone. Tamana, what about you?
I would agree with that. I feel like first year, with Google Calendar was, I mean, your iPhone calendar works as well. Like it was such a big lifesaver. And on top of that, what I would do is I'm a really big list maker. So I always like have a list of like, okay, this is what are the important things for this week. Like if I have a test on Friday, then I know like I have to start like at least 3 or 4 days before. And I always start with like the easiest thing on my list. So whether it comes to like schoolwork or tutoring or like extracurricular activities, whatever it is, in the beginning of every week, you should try to like make a list and then start with the easiest one and you check off like laundry or I don't know, taking the trash out. You put a check mark and you get super motivated to then do the rest of the things as well. So that's something I really, really utilize all the time. But other than that, I also rely on my friends a lot to remind me that like, hey guys, did you do this? Did you do that? And I, like Shelby said, we have very small clinic groups, so we're always constantly reminding each other that like, hey guys, I did this. Did you do it? We have to fill out this paperwork, things like that. So it's also important to have a supportive group to help you organize help you be organized when you're in like the study environment. So that's something I would also try to find in your first year, that who do you jive well with, and keep each other accountable as you're going through your first 2 years.
So I will just say I am not a student, but crossing the easy things off my to-do list is one of my favorite things in the entire world because it does exactly that, right? It helps keep you motivated and you want to do more. So I am all about it. Start the day off that way and then you're set.
Always
Jonathan,
first.
what do you have for us? How do you stay organized?
Oh man. So I am old school. So I am all about having I'm all about having calendars. So I write down everything. So I keep like written calendars. Sorry, my dog. Part of my schedule. So what happens is I write everything down in my calendars. I think I have like 3 of them now, and I have a bunch of my friends help me out with like learning things, and I just get all of those things. Sorry about that. So what I do is I basically write everything down, do my list, and then based off of that, I just check things off. I also agree with having a really good support system. And so Tamana is part of my rotation group, and then Shelby and Tamana both help me out with like learning a lot of things and getting things done off of my list. So that's one thing that's like really helpful for me. If you're old school, I say do your calendar, check things off, and have like little accomplishments throughout the day.
To add to that, I feel like it wasn't just like Google Calendar that we had. I feel there's like a big calendar that's on the side, and there's a little one, and there's like screenshots on your phone. So combine everything, do whatever you need to make sure that you remember your test dates. That's the most important thing.
So you've talked a lot about, sort of using friends and a support network to hold each other accountable and kind of just remind everyone about important things coming up. So any tips on how to do that right now in terms of, kind of like what we were talking about before we started the webinar this evening for first year students that are coming in that maybe don't know anyone or they're not on campus? Any tips on where they can sort of build that relationship? And it could even be right here in the GoToWebinar chat box on this particular broadcast, but any way to sort of extend a lifeline, or any thoughts on how they can build relationships right now? Amana, go ahead. You can start us off on this one.
I was gonna say that for our class, I mean, none of us were in the Bay Area, but one of our classmates, he just started a GroupMe, and then we all connected on GroupMe. And from there, maybe I would suggest that Zoom happy hours, that's something I started doing with my friends. So I feel like that's something you guys or people like who are watching this can definitely do. And then definitely try to like text each other, check up on each other. And then from there, I'm sure you guys will definitely develop like great connections, because this is something so hard that you guys are gonna go through, not to scare you guys, but like when you go through something together, like you really form really close bonds. So that's something that it will happen no matter what. I know you guys are far away, but it'll come. You'll find your people.
Shalvi, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's we made a Facebook group, so it was like a Facebook group, a GroupMe chat, like use social media. There's so many different platforms out there right now. So I know the incoming students right now, they had a Zoom meeting and they posted and they're like, hey, we're having a Zoom meeting during this time. Upperclassmen, join if you can, lowerclassmen, whatever, so they got to meet each other, and they're going to be having a series of those. So I think continuing that, so that way you get to see how people are, you get to interact, maybe play games or something. I know Zoom has a ton of games that you can play, like Jeopardy, and they can get to know each other in that way. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a lot of using technology to figure out who those people are, because some classes are going to be bigger than others. I mean, ours is a pretty small class size, but even with that, finding a smaller group of people that you have a similar personality to, or maybe a similar learning style. And it's okay to switch groups. Like, if you're not vibing well with the way a certain group is studying, it's okay, and no hard feelings will happen. There won't be any enemies made. You can always find another group of people where you gel better with, and it'll be okay.
Jonathan, you're nodding your head. What do you have to add to the discussion here?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment that it's like, especially now, everything is tough, like just now you saw like my dog was barking, but I met some really, really great people. I was lucky enough to, be in school the year before. And so, I've really met my good core group of people, like my friend she's a classmate with us. She just showed up to watch the dogs. So, but that's the thing, right? So you have to find like those people that are going to be there for you, and they're going to kind of help hold you down. This is a very different experience. I'm a second career student, and even for me, this is moving from a traditional office job to something like this is such a huge change. And I think being able to find those groups of people is such a great thing. So I think if you have those opportunities to get in those, like as a first year student coming in, getting into those webinars, getting into those like live meeting sessions, I know for me it's very awkward. Like getting used to even like this sort of format took me a while, because it's just not something that I'm used to. But don't let yourself get on an island, because it just makes everything so much harder.
That's a really good point. Don't work in a vacuum, because you've got a lot of people there to support you. And I know Abhinav has chimed in as well and mentioned virtual class sessions. And that, you know, if you're starting out, that right now is sort of your lifeline to everything that you're doing. So don't be afraid to message and communicate with classmates and just start building out from there. I think that's really, really important. So for the next question, shifting a little bit, Jonathan, I'll start with you on this one. What are some of the online resources that you think are essential and extremely helpful in studying and staying up on coursework and all that stuff beyond the typical, you know, classroom school resources that everybody gets?
Okay. Yeah, so I guess that would go into one of the first questions that you asked with like, what have I done different? And so there's 3 resources that I used, especially for like studying boards, that I wish that I would have started using from day one. One of those is KenHub, like Ken, Barbie and Ken, and then hub.com. And this one you pay like a subscription fee or whatever. But that one you can use for anatomy, especially for HA, LEA, which is the lower extremity anatomy, and then it also has neuro and histology. So what I really liked about that one is that it's very interactive. There's a lot of videos, and then there's a lot of 3D models where you can manipulate the body and really see how origin and insertions work, because sometimes when you're in LEA and you hear like an origin and an insertion and that this is the action of the muscle, sometimes it can be hard to kind of like visualize that in your mind, especially for me. So I like those visuals to really show me what it looks like so that it gets burned in your mind. The other thing, 2 other things that I used is going to be KISS, and it's the Keep It Simple series, and I used that for pharmacology, and I used that for, it's very quick. The videos are like maybe less than 20 minutes, some are like 10, but he moves very fast and he makes you repeat things, and repetition, especially for pharm, is really important because it's really just memorizing a bunch of facts. And then I used Sketchy Micro for learning micro because they're videos, and I'm the type of learner that if I can tell myself a story, then I can remember it forever. So those were kind of the things that I used primarily, especially when studying for boards, that I wish I would have started from day one.
Shelby, how about you?
Kind of piggybacking, I think from the 3 that Jonathan said, I didn't use KenHub, so sounds really good. I'm a very visual learner, and especially, you know, if you're not able to get into the anatomy lab, that might be a really good program to look into. Another one that upperclassmen had suggested to us when it comes to anatomy was Complete Anatomy. I used it for a little bit, but I was more in the lab. So if you can get into lab, I would just recommend going there. It's a lot easier to kind of see it on the cadavers. But if you're not able to go in, I know on Complete Anatomy, I was able to kind of turn the whole structure around, look at it forwards, backwards, like however you want. So that was one thing that I used for anatomy. I wish I used KISS Prep for pharmacology from the beginning. It definitely is key when it comes to repetition. And it's very easy to remember it because he makes you repeat things so many times. So you just kind of hear a buzzword and you just automatically think things that he said, and it was like, okay, this is good, this works. I wish I used it earlier. And Sketchy Micro was amazing for microbiology. I'm not very much of like a learning from books, so the more videos and like the more interactive I can be with the material, I think it's really nice. So Board Vitals, I think like using that earlier on, we didn't get access to it until our 2nd year, but I think if we had access to it earlier and kind of paired it as we were going through the classes, that might have been a good way to kind of re-jog your memory once you're studying for those topics for boards. Yeah. Otherwise, I use class material mostly. So.
Tamana, is there anything different that works for you or that you prefer?
I feel like I mostly relied on class materials. Anki was something that I used towards the end to help memorize things because they have deck of cards already made for you. You just like, it's like flashcards that you just click and they give you 20 flashcards each day and they build up on that. And so next day you'll get like 20 more, things like that. So that kind of helped me memorize certain things that was in the first aid. But other than that, I think Shelby and Jonathan talked about most of the resources that we ended up using. On the side, I would just sometimes just Google things and just, you know, look for YouTube videos if you don't want to pay for anything. I'm sure like not all of the concepts that you come across is not going to be difficult, but the ones that are super difficult, you could try like just Googling things or looking for videos on YouTube. If that doesn't work out, then maybe you can move on to paid services. That's, I guess, like a money saving skill.
Those are really, really good suggestions. One thing I am going to ask you guys, you've all kind of touched on this a little bit, and I think it's so critical just to success in general. How do you know what type of learner you are? You know, I mean, any tips for sort of cultivating that in terms of how you know you work best beyond just trial and error? Is there anything in particular any of you all did? I think Coursera has offered some courses previously, but I don't know if any of you have explored that. Thoughts?
I don't know. So they had us do kind of like a learning skills thing later on in the school year. So that was kind of like, I guess it's like a personality test or like, I don't know, how you learn best kind of test. So you answer a bunch of questions and it'll be like, you are this kind of learner. I didn't personally do that. I did the whole trial and error approach. But I mean, I think my learning style and the way I studied changed depending on the subject. So, I mean, yeah, I'm more of a visual learner and I'm more of a hands-on learner, but that's kind of hard to do with physiology, you know, or like microbiology. You can't really see it or do it. So for a lot of those, I would just rewrite a lot and like watch videos on it or something and hear someone talking to me about it. So your learning strategy or the way you process the material might be different depending on what the subject is. So I think that's a critical point to kind of keep in mind.
Yes, really good point there. Jonathan, what about you?
So mine was a little bit opposite from Shelby. Mine was more of a crash and burn approach. And
Nothing wrong with that either.
yeah, you know, going from like, again, like I was saying, you know, I'm a second career student. So going from working and at the time I was running my own dental practice and switching from something like that to moving into like 20 something plus hours of medical school and trying to fit all of that in and getting ready for exams and all these deadlines and everything was just crazy. And so I hadn't had to learn how to be a learner for, you know, a number of years since I had finished my master's degree. And it was truly a crash and burn. The first few months was just trying to get my bearings and trying to keep up with all of the information coming. And then I actually used our school, like the school, each school will have like their own like education services where they have like professionals there that will help you really hone in on, you know, where you're really good at, where you might be falling behind. They can look at exams for you. And I definitely think that that's not something that you should ever feel like whatever about. You know, we're all there to learn and everybody learns in different ways. So I did that and it really helped me hone in on the fact that I learn by telling stories. And so it had really helped me to cut down on a whole bunch of extra that I was doing that didn't really matter or count towards my learning. And so once I did that and they helped me figure those things out, then the ball really started getting rolling with me. So I think for me, it was really more crashing and burning, getting those punches like right in the beginning, and then but then also getting back up and using the services that are around you to really course correct. And I'm telling you, that's just like gold for me.
All right, Tamana, you're up. How about you?
I would say that I'm a visual learner, but at the same time, I feel like the way I learn is that I'm constantly checking my knowledge as I'm going through my notes and everything like the professor taught that day. So if I'm not able to like recall something or draw it out, drawing is another thing that I feel like I always do, like draw a bunch of diagrams, pictures, and things like that. So visual plus, you know, your drawing knowledge and your, you know, like just making your own personal notes is another thing that I use to kind of memorize things and learn things. You develop your own theory as well when you're like learning things, and you figure out whether it works for you or not. And then it's just trial and error. I don't know if there's like a better method for it, but it's just, you, like I said, like you will know where you're at by your first test, but make sure you're tapping into all the resources before the first test.
Good advice there for sure. So let's take a moment and shift a little bit and talk about boards and studying for boards and how and when to start. This is one of the questions that a couple students actually emailed me in advance of this webinar to ask during the recording. And I know in coordinating with you guys in lead up to this, you guys were busy preparing for boards. So tell me, what's your ideal timeline? What was the studying process like? Any of you can start us off on this one. It's so fresh. Take it away.
I guess I'll start. So for me, so I know that there's like, for me, I was always listening the year before, like my first year, trying to gather like exactly what you were asking, like when did you start or when did you start? And so I got so many wide-ranging answers. You know, some people studied for 2 weeks before, some people started 2 months before. Some schools start offering, that's one really good question to ask when you're interviewing, is how and when and what kind of things they do to help you prepare for boards itself. Because studying for classroom stuff, yes, it helps you prepare for boards, but that is not preparing for boards. For me, because I am a slow learner and it takes me a long time to start, I gave myself a really good time frame to study. So I gave myself a couple of months to really study for boards because I wanted to get it done in the one shot. And so I was you know, I told myself I'm gonna do everything I can to get it done in one shot. And so for me, it was giving myself enough time to not ever feel like my back was against the wall, but I didn't want to give myself so much time that I was tricking myself thinking that I was getting more done than I actually was. So I think during your first year, you're gonna start to find out how long it takes you to learn concepts and to get through things. And then throughout that first year, start kind of thinking about how long it takes you to learn something. And then that'll start to give you an idea of how much time frame you really need to give yourself a best first chance.
Shalvi, how about you? Anything to add there?
I don't know. I think start kind of like going back to what we wish we would have learned or knew about. If you start utilizing those things earlier, for example, like Sketchy Micro, if I was going through those videos and those organisms and watching it and taking notes while I was in that class, it'll save a lot of time when you're studying for that section for boards. So I mean, I think just to kind of add to what Jonathan said, and if Tamana is like the study queen. Like I go to her if I'm like lost and I'm like, this is not getting into my brain. I cannot read this first aid book and get through biochemistry. How are you doing this? This is a key example of, you know, use your support system. I've reached out to Abhinav, like talk to your upperclassmen, see what works, see what they used. So I kind of reached out to people and I was like, people who study similar to me. And I was like, you know, how did you tackle biochemistry? What was your go-to for studying for lower extremity anatomy? So kind of breaking down the board exam, the different topics that are on it, and what different people use to study for each subject, and kind of giving yourself time to see what works and what doesn't work. And then once you have those materials down, just really going through it as many times as you can so that it becomes as second nature as it can be. I mean, it never feels like you retained anything or know anything. So the more times you can go through it, hopefully magically it just pops up when you see a question.
Samana, you're the study queen apparently, so you've got to have something to add to this conversation.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I have a really bad cough, so I didn't want anybody to hear me dying. So I would say that, like, when it comes to timeline, never ever study 2 weeks before your boards. Like, that's not a good idea. I'm sure some people are able to do it, and maybe you're one of them, but why risk it, right? So I would say is that 2 months before you have your schedule, you start setting like really hard at that 2 month mark. But before that, you're kind of looking over things, so your brain's kind of getting used to all the things that you have to study. That's another thing that Shelby touched on, where it's like there's so many different types of materials out there. You just don't know where to start or what to do. So start looking at everything and see what you like, what you don't like, and then when the 2 month time hits, then you just want to start right away. And first aid is something that's like a Bible for me, at least, for boards. And I wish I kind of was incorporating first aid with my first and second year of studying, because first aid is a book where it goes through different systems. So as you're going through, say, like the cardiology system, if you're taking notes and seeing what's on the first aid, your brain has kind of already done the first path. So you kind of like take it from there. So you kind of looked at it. So when you're starting to prepare for boards, you're ready to dive into it. You're not looking at something that's completely new to you. So again, just repetition is the key. Personally, that's what I feel like. So the sooner you can start, but not like 6 months early, but give yourself enough time to keep studying and repeating it, and you'll be fine.
Well, you just make it sound so easy and so like serene and peaceful, and like it's such a just namaste experience. I'm so sure
it's not at all.
So with that being said, like you've talked about repetition a lot, are there any other memorization strategy tips that you guys share?
I think for me, it's more of like, because of the way I learn, it's a story for me. So I try to use the least amount of materials that I possibly can, because I want to create that story so that when I get asked a question, I have like a path that I can move down. And so it's not so much like an ABC sort of situation that I'm memorizing. It's more of like a scene that I'm memorizing. That's why Sketchy is so great, because it creates like a scene that you can kind of jump around from. And so it's not so much that you have to be asked this question in these two certain ways for you to be able to answer it correctly, or else you'll kind of fall apart. It's more of creating like a scene that you can kind of move around in. And I think for mine, it was like being able to create the story, and then I like to study alone first when I'm like really trying to get the content down. But then when I'm there, I like to study with like other people, or do like what we would call talk it out situations, where we would then all kind of meet and then talk about the content and talk about where they're at. And it really helped me to replace or put in gaps in my story that I might not have had. So again, going back to Tamana, like she creates really great stories about I don't know if she really realizes it, but she creates a really great story about the content that's placed above her, so she's able to create this really great construct. And so I would use that in order to fill gaps and holes in like what the story that I had made. So I think that's kind of good tips.
I would say that like for me, it's more like I don't like big chunks of material. When you're going through your class, like you're gonna get like for each lecture you'll get like 120 slides. You'll get like I don't know like 200 slides sometimes. Then your professors put those slides in to help you understand things, but you might not need all those slides. So what I used to do is just make it more concise. Like I would write the important things in a separate sheet of paper. So that kind of like made it less scary for me, and it was more like something that I wrote with my own hands, and then I could see it and follow it. And I guess like that's the same story form that Jonathan's talking about. It kind of like overflowed and just helped me memorize things. Again, like it's like you have to write things, you have to look at things, you have to draw things, you have to make sense of things instead of just looking at slides over and over again. Be more of an active learner rather than just like, you know, trying to absorb things. I think that's like the main thing. It's like you can't just like sketchy micro, yes you can just like play the video and it would just like somehow get absorbed in your brain, but that does not work for other things. Like you actually have to like repeat it to yourself. So that's like the biggest thing I would say, like be an active learner. If you feel like story form is helping you, do that. If you're somebody who likes like write little notes, do that. If you flashcards work for you, I would do that.
Yeah, I would do much of the same. I think I would always have to, so I'd go to class and that would kind of be like the first pass. And, you know, of course you're going to space out. Some lectures are like 3 hours long. And so I'd have some gaps here and there. So I'd always go back and re-listen to the lecture and take notes on my iPad about, you know, any main points or things that the professor said that kind of stood out. And then I'd go back again like a third time and make kind of like an outline of what the Monda's talking about, but with the added notes. So it was like the notes from the slides, the notes that I heard, you know, or that I took from the professor saying things, and then it all got compiled in like a concise, like 2 to 3 pages instead of like, you know, 100 something slides. And so that was something that was helpful for me because I could just read through a couple pages rather than like scroll through so many slides. It wasn't as daunting. And something I kind of started doing later on was I did kind of more of the study by myself approach. And then later on, I would do talk it out. So once I felt like I was at a good place and I felt like I knew the material, at that point, I would do kind of like a group study, talk it out session. Like I did this with Jonathan and like pharmacology and podiatric medicine and podiatric surgery, just like talking through the lecture and going back and forth and asking questions about, oh, you know, how would you do this procedure? Or what does it mean when you do a reverse Morton? So that way you're kind of actively learning and you're asking those questions that sometimes showed up on tests. So, you know, what someone else might have picked up on might not be what you picked up on. So those group sessions, once you've gone through the material, are very helpful. And I stress once you've gone through the material, because if you haven't, you're going to be lost, you're going to get overwhelmed, you're going to get anxious, and then it's going to be hard for you to even get through the material on your own. So that's my words of wisdom and advice there, because I know that happened to me a couple of times, and I was like, okay, I need to step away and get through this myself, and then I'll join you all when I'm there.
I think that's really interesting that you and Jonathan sort of share this same approach of trying to process it on your own first and then kind of coming back, and then you're ready to share with the group. I think that's a wonderful approach. So kudos to you guys for figuring that one out. So you talked a little bit, you touched on taking notes, right? And taking notes on your iPad. Is there any specific note-taking software you guys use or you recommend? Basically, how do you take notes during lectures? Any recommendations for that?
Notability.
Notability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I used to use OneNote, and I switched to Notability. I think see what your professor uses. A lot of our professors give lectures through Notability, so the interface is just so much easier. Because when I had OneNote, I had to like download the PDF and then download the audio, and like it was just like a mess. But I feel like with Notability, it's just more seamless.
And I feel like you would those notes stay with you for a really long time as well. So that's something that's an app I would definitely download before you start school.
Good tip there for sure. So let's talk a little bit about testing. Any tips or any words of advice for folks that may have anxiety around testing or anything like that?
I think especially like if you, so there's, I know for each school they have, especially like if you work with, if you have like really big test anxiety or anything like that, you can take your test by yourself. I do that. And so I switched over after my first year. I started taking tests by myself. But I think everybody, you just kind of figure out your own way. I think definitely making sure you relax before your test. The day of the test, I mean, it's like, well, that's it, you know. You did as much as you could that day, so it's like you're done. So just go take it. I think definitely. I think if you prepare well, then there's not going to be a ton of anxiety. I think it's just more making sure that you prepare. Honestly, for me, I think the most anxious ones were the first exams of the first year and getting through those. And once you get through those, you're kind of just like, oh, okay, I can do this. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like if you start early enough, it will take away so much of your anxiety. And when you get to your test and you're looking at a question that you feel like you've never seen before, don't just freak out. If you feel like you've put in the work and you worked hard enough, you'll be fine. Sometimes professors try to I don't want to say professors try to trick you, they're just kind of trying to teach you critical thinking. But if you see a question that you don't know, look at the answer choices. Look at what you know for sure is incorrect. Cross those out. That gives you 50-50 chance, or I don't know, 33% chance of getting the question right if you just take away one answer choice. So again, keeping a calm mind. Sometimes I drink chamomile tea, so do whatever you need to stay calm during the test.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people where I get very, very nervous before tests, and I don't think that has ever gone away. If anything, it got worse when I got to med school. But yeah, I think I've gotten better at kind of setting myself up so that I feel less anxious. And when we were taking tests in person, what that meant for me was I would just need to be by myself until I went to go sit to take the test. Because I think when I would get into the room, for some people, it's getting to the room early, setting up your space, knowing where you're going to be at, calming down, breathing, putting on headphones. I would do that sometimes, or sometimes I would set up my area and then I would just leave the classroom, go to the bathroom, take a walk, and then come back 5 minutes before the test was going to start. Just because when I'd sit in class, everyone would kind of be talking and, hey, so do you remember what the concentration for sodium is inside of a cell? And I'd just be like, oh my God, do I know that? And then I'd start freaking out. And so that's kind of why I would just kind of step away, come back when I'd be calm, and the classroom was already quiet. But now with all of the testing probably happening online and at home, that was a whole new situation to kind of adapt to. So I would just set up your study area and your study space the way you're going to be taking the test, so that when the time comes, you're already comfortable kind of being in that space, being in that area. If anything, my stress and anxiety level taking tests online has gone way down because I'm taking it in my room, in my house. People aren't there and I'm way more calm. So, I think that might be the silver lining to all of this distance learning. If being around other people when you're taking a test makes you nervous, that's kind of gone. So I don't know.
I think you're right on with that. I mean, that's all we can do, right? Is try to look for any type of bonus in this situation that isn't ideal for anyone. So I can certainly appreciate that. So switching topics slightly a little bit here, how do you all mentally cope with just all the stresses associated with medical school in general? And in particular, I know you guys have a fairly extensive extracurricular activity that you guys manage with your podcast. So talk a little bit about that. How do you find time to manage it all?
I don't know. For me, that's my fun thing. I think like, yeah, there's school is stressful and tests are like hard, but I think find something that gets you excited and happy. And that's kind of how, the PodMed Adventures page even came about. It was just something that I wanted to do to spread awareness about the profession, because I used to be a pre-health advisor before coming into school, and I was just so surprised that I didn't even know about it. And I was like, why don't people know about it? And then I had all of these questions about what is it? What's it about? What do you do? And so I think like, I don't know, if it's something that you love and it's like your stress relief, it's kind of like you make time for it in a way because it's just something that you like doing. So I mean, yeah, the page is one thing that we like doing, and a lot of the topics that we talk about are things that we have questions about. So I mean, a lot of those topics that come up, it's because, hey, do you guys know how to study for boards? And hey, how do we tackle this whole externship thing? So I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, trial and error when it comes to how we run that. But I think like something that's been hard right now with COVID going on is going out and volunteering in the community and doing a lot of that hands-on work. I think that's something that would like help me get excited, especially if you're sitting in the classroom all the time. That was something that like I would really look forward to. But I don't know, I think like just have things that get you excited and happy and celebrate those little wins. Like go out and eat food. Like it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Yeah. I don't know.
Mana and Jonathan, anything to add there?
I would say that, especially your like first year, you're so sleep deprived. So that sleeping and catching up on sleep is like the biggest thing that I used to do all the time my first year. That like people would, after their test, they would just like go out, and I would just want to like sleep and just watch Netflix or do something that's like comforting to me rather than something crazy. So that's how I feel like I manage stress. And I also like to cook. So that's something I also do. Just some good food, Netflix, and a good comforter, and you're set.
Jonathan, what about you? I know you had to change your Netflix password there for a little bit.
Oh yeah, yeah, especially during studying for boards. But yeah, I think for me, I'm a little different because being in healthcare, it's a very extroverted field, and we have to be like very on and always out there when we're seeing patients. But I am definitely more in my own when I'm more of an introvert. So for me, relaxing and like kind of recharging my batteries actually means like being alone and being home and just like being alone in my own space, like cleaning, cooking, watching TV. I have a Chihuahua. She's like 13 years old now, so she's like super chill. But I just adopted a new Great Dane, and he just got here today. So he's my reward for 2 years of hard work. But yeah, I think it's definitely my happy place is being alone and recharging my batteries. So I think it's definitely finding out what works for you and then making sure that you give yourself that time, even if it's just like one night or one afternoon. Find your little sliver of happy place and just don't forget it and do it.
So I think this is really interesting. One thing that I've sort of heard you guys kind of touch on all along, whether it's recognizing your little slice of happiness, whatever it is, or your learning style, is there's a lot of sort of self-discovery along this path, right? Because you're learning about yourself and what works best for you and what makes you feel good and makes you feel comfortable. And I think that's so important. And that's something that we should always remember to do, right? Like it doesn't stop when we graduate or we get our diploma. So I think that's so good that you guys are so aware. Keep it up. So I'm eyeing the time here and we've got about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to start wrapping it up. One question for sure. One piece of advice for first year students right now. Jonathan, we'll start with you.
I think one piece of advice that I would give first year students that are just starting is don't shy away from even if we don't start on campus, don't shy away from the opportunities to start building some relationships with people, even if it is just online. I will say that even because I'm an introvert, it does deter me from forging friendships or anything like that. But I went ahead and I pushed myself to do that, and I've been good friends with Tamana and Shelby and my core group of friends since almost day from first semester, yeah. And so I would say that is going to be the biggest thing that you can possibly do, is making sure you forge those relationships in the beginning, because it's kind of cliche to say, but nobody is going to know what you're going through, and everybody's going to be trying to relate to you and trying to empathize with you, but nobody's going to understand what you're going through except for the people that are in the hell with you. So make sure that you forge those relationships and really reach out to try to meet people.
My one piece of advice would be to take breaks when you need it. If things are not, if you're feeling frustrated and things aren't sticking and you're like, I have to get through this lecture and I have to do this, and you don't have to do it right then and there. Take some time, step away, refocus, regroup, go take a shower, go eat some food and watch Netflix, relax a little bit, and come back with a fresh mind. Don't try to push yourself. I think that would be the biggest set of advice that I would give to a first year coming in, because you will get overwhelmed. First year, first semester was probably the toughest, I think, looking back still, but once you adjust, you'll be fine. Just take that time to take breaks when you need it and celebrate those little wins. So like after you finish your first midterm, go get your favorite food and get takeout and then celebrate that, or go get cake and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I remember like Shelby and I, and sometimes Jonathan too, we have a little Danish pastry shop near our school. Like every time like we finished an exam, we don't care how we did or what we did, we're just like run to that pastry shop and then get ourselves a pastry just to reward ourselves. Because like you have to remember, like you're working so hard, so you don't want to forget that it's you who's doing all the work. So sometimes give yourself a gift of all the hard work. And another advice would be remember why you're there. You wanted to be here for the longest time. You're finally here. You don't ever want to compromise that. So keep that goal in mind no matter what you do. Prioritize that. If you have to miss out on something, which all of us did our first 3 years, it's gonna be okay. You will get to relive that in like 2 years' time. Like right now, we have so much time. It sucks that COVID is taking over everything, but prioritizing why you're here, following your dream is what I would do your first year and your second year.
Keep your eyes on the prize. I love that, and stay motivated. So that's about all the time we have for questions right now. I am going to share a poll with you guys real quick. We want you all to help us choose our next webinar topic. So hopefully I'm doing this correctly. Hold on, let's see. We've got a couple different topics up here. Let us know what you guys are most interested in seeing, what you want to learn about, what you want to talk about. Also, if you have additional suggestions or thoughts about it, feel free to email me. I'm always available. You can reach out to any of us. We can certainly make sure that we talk about it and that we get answers for you guys. And then one more thing before I hand it back over to Abhinav. And let's see if I can do this. Bear with me 1 second. Oh no. All right, maybe I can't share my screen, so I'm not going to try. Anyway, we have a new student member logo that we're so excited to launch for you guys. It's an APMA student member logo. It's available on the website at apma.org/student resources. And oh, after the poll is done, I should be able to share it. Thank you, Abhinav, for that. I appreciate it. So let's see, I think we're done collecting responses. Now let's see. Oh, show screen. So hopefully now you guys can see that. So if you go to apma.org/student resources, we have a downloadable logo. You guys can throw this in your email signatures. It's available in both a JPEG and a PNG file. So we're really excited to share that with you all. And now with that being said, I don't think I have anything else, and I will hand it back over to Abhinav whenever he's ready.
I want to thank everyone for their great questions and taking the time to join us for tonight's webinar. A special thank you to our excellent panelists. Thank you all for the great tips. APMA will schedule another PodMed student webinar in the coming weeks, so stay tuned to your email and be sure to follow us on Instagram at @official_APMA to stay up to date on all of our upcoming student activities. Until then, I hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thank you guys again so much. Have a great night. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.